a step back to say why we think place-based impact investing is so important now in the UK, the reason why we need it, there's a few things. So one is that there's lots of regional deprivation and inequality across the UK. There are parts of the UK that have not been invested in for a very long time, and there are very high levels of inequality. And we also know that there's nowhere near enough money coming from the government to sort of address the problem. But at the same time, we have lots of pension funds in particular who are looking for things to invest in that will give them a good long-term income stream. So the whole concept of how we came up with the place-based impact investing framework initially 3 years ago in that white paper was about bringing that challenge together with that source of funding to work out how we can, get that money deployed in ways that help address that fundamental regional inequality. And I guess it's worth just saying, how things have traditionally worked in the UK is you often have, when development does happen and investment happens, is it's often done by property developers who will come into a place and they often will do a lot of consultation with the local community and do a lot of economic impact analysis for what their investment will contribute. But by the time they do that because they need to get permission to do the development, but by the time they've done the development, they often sell it on, often to private owners, and then they have no long-term accountability for actually delivering those outcomes. So they kind of make lots of promises, but then there's no follow-up to sort of see whether that outcome was actually delivered. And what we've been trying to do with this model is bringing in those longer-term investors who do want to invest in places for the long term, but haven't got that level of experience of engaging with communities and understanding what people need in those places. So it's partly trying to bridge the gap between the public sector and the private sector, but also between the developers and the long-term investors. And we actually see a lot of investors now trying to work more strategically with those developers who've got the experience around the community engagement to sort of make sure that piece gets carried forward. So as you say, we do have this conceptual model, which we usually represent it like a big temple with the sort of investors at the top and the places as the foundations, and then the pillars that run in between them represent the different areas of investment that the place needs in order to thrive. So that includes things like housing, investment in small and medium businesses, investments in energy networks and natural capital. And part of the challenge and the opportunity there is that both on the public and the private sector side, those areas tend to be dealt with separately, and we need to think of them as part of a kind of a system that all needs to fit together and work together. You can't. We often find we struggle to build homes in places where there aren't enough energy or transport connections, for example. So making sure that there's a kind of coherent investment plan is a really important element too. So I think I'll pause there because that's probably enough to be starting with.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, you described a little bit your model, and you emphasize the important stages that you are following up. And so with the finalization of the conceptualization of your model, you have moved to the concept to practice stage. Could you please give us some examples of how your model works on the ground? What are some of the best practices you have identified in implementing the place-based impact investing model?
Yes, of course. So after we did the original white paper, the next thing we did was sort of initiate what we called a series of lab projects. So these were ideas where we would work with a number of different local communities around the UK to help them develop ideas that they have that required investment and get them to a stage where they were ready to share with investors. And I think the key approach in that has been, rather than what often happens is places, when they do talk to investors, they talk to them maybe one at a time. But what we've been doing is and they also kind of wait until they've developed quite a detailed investment prospectus. What we've been finding quite valuable is sharing ideas when they're only partly developed, so there's an opportunity to influence the shape of the plan, but also doing it in a sort of safe roundtable environment where we get a number of investors to come together with slightly different levels of risk appetite and other parameters and scale and so on, and get them to kind of feedback as a collective, so that we can then shape those opportunities with the places to make sure that they are as attractive as possible to that range of investors when they finally become released. To give you the practical examples, so the first 4 labs we ran were in different parts of the UK. One was in Bath, which is in the sort of southwest of England, and the particular challenge they were addressing was around how to provide enough housing in the city for people who were kind of what you might call key workers, or kind of people who are going to be working in the local economy, because the housing market was dominated by 2 extremes really. One was people like to live there because it's a very attractive place, so a lot of the housing is very expensive, but they also have quite a bit of what we call affordable housing, so discounted housing for people who can't afford to pay market levels. But there's a big gap in the middle for housing for the sorts of people who could work in the local economy. So that was one project. Another one was in South Essex, so that was in the east of England. That was very much focused around how to retrofit old housing to make it more suitable for net zero going forward, and taking into account the fact that this housing is owned by a number of different organisations, and how could we get investors into that mix. And we had some brokered some very practical conversations there, which led to follow-up projects. There was another one in Manchester in the north of England that had a new development housing theme to it, but the question there was it was a very big scheme, so what was the best way to divide it up and to phase it over time to make it as attractive as possible to different types of investor. And they got some very practical feedback from investors in terms of how big they should make each investment parcel, and what type of housing they should put into each phase to get the most value out of it. And then the final one was up in Scotland, a place called Dunoon, which was seeking investment to create what we call an adventure tourism project, where they would take advantage of their natural landscape to act as a sort of centre for mountain biking and hiking, and then use that to stimulate the local economy, and say they had some investment they wanted to achieve there. So quite a different mix, and then we've done a number of others since then. But I think that model of working out what investors are looking for, because it's not always what the places think it is. I mean, they often tend to focus heavily on the financial returns, but don't always have a good enough story around the impact and how they think this project is going to contribute to better local outcomes. So having a really good theory of change attached to the project is actually something that a lot of the impact investors we work with are looking for. But then also being open to and listening to that feedback from the investors, who are also interested in just understanding, how quickly could I invest in this project? Who owns the land? Has it got planning permission, or how likely is it to get planning permission? Are there people in this place who I can actually trust to get on with things? Because one of the challenges we have is projects take a very long time to get moving in places sometimes. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour.
Yes, thank you very much for different types of examples that you provided. And my last question about the coverage of your services. In terms of place-based impact investing, you have reporting services, you have a research center, research program on place-based impact investing, and also most importantly, you have established a network for place-based impact investors, right? And you are trying to bridging the gap between local government and institutional investors. Could you please elaborate a little bit on those services?
Yeah, of course, yes. I mean, I think we play quite an interesting role in the UK in that we work at different parts in that funding ecosystem, and I think that's really important, that sort of system level view of how do we get all the different groups of parties to kind of come together and work effectively together and understand each other's objectives and constraints, and that kind of underpins, I think, everything that we do. So we're sort of regarded as a sort of neutral convener who can bring different parties together. We're not sort of aligned to any one particular investor, for example. So you're right. So we do advisory projects for different organisations. So for example, I recently did a project for the Scottish National Investment Bank, which is one of our development finance institutions, who wanted to review that. They've got 3 missions, one of which is around place, and so they wanted to work out how they could be a bit sharper about how they define that mission. So I did a piece of work for them as one example. I mean, we advise individual organisations across the ecosystem around how they can, fine-tune their own internal strategies and processes in this space. We do pieces of research. We're currently working with one of the regional development bodies in the UK to work out another white paper we might do about how to encourage more investment into their region, and that's with a big focus around high growth companies and innovation clusters linked to universities. So that's one that we're currently in discussion on as a piece of research and a white paper. We've been starting to do some interesting work with some of the local government pension schemes, who are some of the most important underpinning investors in this space. So the one we did for Greater Manchester Pension Fund that was published at the end of last year has set a really interesting template for others to follow. So this is about baselining and helping them to understand what they've already invested in and how far it meets the criteria of being place-based impact investing. And we've now got a number of other local government schemes following that, wanting to understand where they are and where they could get to. And then, as you say, we have created this network. So this is a collaboration between ourselves, the Impact Investing Institute in the UK, and the Institute for Economic Development. And what we've done is create a grouping that brings together, I think at the moment, about 15 institutional investors and a similar number of local and combined authorities on the public sector side. And we meet about 3 times a year as a group in different parts of the country, and we discuss topics of shared interest. And it's a very kind of we call it a safe space. So we want people to have open conversations about what they need to see to make things work better. So as an example, in our last meeting, we had a discussion around these sort of investment prospectuses that local government often publish to try and attract investment, and getting feedback from investors on how they think of those documents and what would be more useful if they could be and it was about being more open and transparent about which opportunities are really ready to invest in and that sort of thing. So that's been going for about a year now. We're just going into our 2nd year, and we're in the process of we've got a lot of people keen to join, so we're now thinking about, do we create sort of subgroups around particular areas? So we might have a specific group around housing and maybe another one around natural capital as examples, because they have slightly different groups of stakeholders, and we're getting to the point where we're worried about having too many people around the table to have a good conversation, but it's certainly been very popular.
Thank you very much for all of the valuable information that you provided. And also thank you for your time. It was very beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me know if I can follow up in any way. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Tamam, teşekkürler. Şimdi 2 tane de kısa videomuz olacak. İlki İngiltere NAB'ından, NAB diyorum, National Advisory Board. Biz de EYDK olarak GSC'nin bir ulusal danışma kuruluyuz. Impact Investing Institute'da GSC'nin İngiltere'nin danışma kurulu. Mark Hall'dan yani önce aynen Mark'tan başlayalım öncelikli olarak. Bir Mark'ı dinleyelim. 3 dakikalık kısa bir videomuz var.
Hello to the Impact Investing Advisory Board in Turkey and to everyone attending this Impact Forum today, covering global perspectives on place-based impact investing. My name is Mark Hall and I lead the Impact Investing Institute's work on place-based impact investing. We are the UK's National Advisory Board for Impact Investing, and it was great to hear about the developments in Turkey on this agenda at the Global Steering Group for Impact Investing Summit in Malaga last year, and see this agenda now moving forward. Sorry I can't attend the session with you today, but I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time to talk about our work here in the UK. Now, the UK is a country of deep-rooted regional inequalities with marked differences in quality of life and life expectancy depending on where you live. So place-based impact investing has been one of the core themes of the Institute's work since our inception in 2019. We see a major opportunity to unlock significant levels of private finance to be channeled towards local investments across the UK economy, whether that be in affordable housing, supporting enterprises to thrive, or towards a just transition to a net zero economy. Over the past 4 years, we've led a body of research looking at a range of issues on how you can originate and develop investable propositions, developing the right financing mechanisms to get capital into communities, how public finance and social investment can leverage further private investment, and how to unlock significant levels of pension fund investment into local opportunities. At the Institute, we've set up a new challenge lab to develop innovative solutions and collaborations to address these challenges head-on, alongside other challenges such as preventative health and investing for a just transition. We've set out ambitious plans to scale up place-based impact investing across the UK, unlocking more capital, working in partnership with more places, supporting the development of more products and funds, scaling up community development finance institutions, ensuring that all businesses can access the capital they need to thrive, and embedding community engagement within place-based impact investing, ensuring that solutions are responding directly to the opportunities and challenges of specific places across the UK. To find out more about this work, we've published a recent report charting out our progress and alongside the work of others, including the likes of the Good Economy, who I know are contributing to your event today. To make progress on this agenda, collaboration will be key. So I'm wishing you a great and productive event today, and we look forward to working with you and our international partners to drive this agenda forward in the years ahead. Thank you.
Evet, Mark'a da teşekkür ediyoruz video gönderdiği için bize. Şimdi İngiltere'den dünyanın bir diğer ucuna Arjantina'ya gidiyoruz. Arjantina'dan bir videomuz var. GSC biliyorsunuz çatı kuruluşumuz. Ondan bahsetmiştik. Politika. Biraz sabırsız galiba diyormuşum videosu. Hani ismini söyleyeyim en azından diye. Evet, hep de biraz sabırsızdır gerçekten. Biz de çok yakın çalışıyoruz JC'nin politika ekibiyle. Kendisi de politika ekibinin başında Arjantina'dan aslında Arjantina'dan videoyu gönderdi bize. JC'nin politika ekibi Arjantina'da çünkü. Sebastian Welisiejko. Şimdi ben hani sözü son videoyu kendisine bırakayım. O da JC'nin yani etki yatırımı ve Yer Odaklı Etki yatırımı ile ilgili olarak bilgileri iletsin. Teşekkür ederim Arda.
Impact Forum organized by EYDK and Tarkem. It's a super privilege to be able to share this moment with you all. I am Sebastian Welisiejko. I act as GFG Impact's Chief Policy Officer, working out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, globally with all the 40 plus members of GFG Impact around the world, of which EYDK is our distinguished member in Turkey, and I'm very happy to say hi to you all. So I would say that from experiences, when you choose to target a specific area, just like I understand that Tarkem does with the interventions in the areas and the historic city center. And you will hear from many other examples, hopefully these days during the Impact Forum. When it comes to us and an impact investment, if the place-based bit comes from your strategy, you can organize it through a certain issue. And you can think about an impact investment strategy to address gaps in education or skills development or health. Or you can think about a strategy to tackle a series of intertwined problematics in a certain area. And that I would call intuitively something that resembles, whether you give it another name, a place-based investment strategy. And in terms of impact, why impact investment? It's because by those investments, you intentionally want to achieve real, measurable, intentional outcomes that mark the improvement of certain metrics that can be social, can be climatic, can be environmental. Ideally, they build this bridge between the social and the environmental impact. And you want to invest in a means that will obviously yield profit, maximize profit for the investors, but subject not only to the restriction of risk adjustment, which is a traditional means of investment. We invest in opportunity A or B, depending on what we expect will yield the highest return, subject to a level of risk that we can live with as investors. But in the new economy, in the new impact economy, we try to transition and change the DNA of this decision-making rule to say, well, let's look for the maximum profit, subject to a risk that is attainable to us, acceptable to us, but also maximizing impact and measuring impact and having very tight, very credible, very transparent, what we would call impact measurement and management strategies. Going after the impact, defining the impact, managing, learning, improving, and reporting back on those impacts. A new paradigm from a two-dimensional economy of risk and return to a three-dimensional economy of risk, return, and impact. In the case of place-based investment, I just want to, again, emphasize this as an organizing entry point of a given strategy. And I will tell you a little story of something that I had the privilege of leading back in the day when I was Vice Minister of Social Development in my country, in Argentina, up to the year 2019. I acted as Secretary of State for what we called back in the day social urban integration, leading a nationwide strategy to urbanize and develop slums and informal settlements in the country. Up to the year 2016, the country, Argentina, a country that belongs to the G20, together with Turkey and others, had no idea how many people in the country lived in slums, lived in informal urban areas, defined as areas where families have no formal access to the services of water, sanitation, access to electricity, and where people don't have land titles. They can demonstrate land ownership, which brings a whole layer of social, environmental challenges for the families, for the communities, for the natural systems that form these neighborhoods and these informal urban areas. So we said, well, what we can't define, what we can't measure, we cannot manage, we cannot